Do I see you? Valerie, Valerie, Valerie.
Hi.
Hi. I hear you, but I don't see you. Wait a minute. Oh, I see you here. There you go. Perfect, Valerie. Hi. Thank you for joining us. So I was explaining to the other panelists as well that I sent you the agenda. So we'll start with a bit of an intro that's going to be useful for you guys to grasp a bit the context. And then we'll be joined shortly by the Secretary General of YMCA Europe, who's going to welcome everybody with a couple of words. And then we'll go with the panel, which should start with Rosalind from the European Youth Forum, who's got some time constraints, so we'll try to make it as friendly as possible. And so basically it would be important simply to try and keep to the 5-10 minutes, because as you can see, this is a very crowded room of people. And at the end of your panel, it would be nice to get our participants to ask you a couple of questions. So it would be cool if you have enough time to answer them. And I think I think we're waiting for Rosalind. We're just waiting for Rosalind for a minute, and then we will start. We're just 5 minutes in, so it's not a tragedy. Welcome everyone, by the way. Thank you for joining us on time. And so we'll just waiting for a second for the last of the panelists to join us, and then we're gonna start the meeting. For those who don't know me yet, I don't know, I'm Milenia Ventroni from YMCA Europe. I'm the advocacy and fundraising officer, and we've organized these meetings within the YMCA Youth-led Solution Summit for climate action. So this is something that is near and dear for all of you, I'm pretty sure. And we are lucky enough that a group of panelists from other youth organizations has joined us to share their experiences, to share their inspiration, and hopefully to help you navigate this intense week you have ahead for you, starting October 19th. Of course, I want to take the opportunity as well to invite the panelists to the summit as well, that I can ask them to join. Actually, I'll send you a link so that you can join it directly, and it will be streamed too, so you'll be able to see. There will be a few interesting speakers as well, the UN Youth Envoy, who some of you I'm pretty sure know quite well, and the WWF is a partner in the event, so it's another partner you know well for sure. And so yeah, it should be an interesting experience for all of us. So it's 5:38. There's 36 of us online. We're just gonna wait another little minute. I'm just gonna check if I have any info from our last panelist. There we go. Just a little minute. I wish I had some waiting music for you guys, but apparently it's very harmful for people's mental health. So I won't do that to you. Recent research, Monica, I swear, has proven that especially Vivaldi is very harmful to people. Doesn't keep them calm at all. So I won't do that to you. So you'll have a relaxing end of week rather than a stressful one. There we go. Voila. Just a minute. Voila. I'm just providing the link here. All right. So I think we can start right now, and our Secretary General will join us in a jiffy, as they say. The native speakers of the English language, which I'm not, so I apologize in advance for any mistake. So welcome everybody, and thanks a million for joining us. And this is the SDG13 based event of YMCA Europe as a part of the prep week for the YMCA Youth-led Solution Summit on Climate Action. So I am Ilenia Ventroni from YMCA Europe. I'm the advocacy officer, and I'll be, as we say, your Virgil, guiding you in this voyage through this YMCA global action. And so I'll explain to you a little bit what's the YMCA Youth-led Solution Summit. And then after my introduction on the summit itself, I leave the floor to our Secretary General, Juan Simões Iglesias, who has just joined us now. Hi, Juan. And after Juan's brief into us all, then we'll kickstart the panel of our very nice participants here. And after that, there will be time for questions from all the participants. So if anyone has any question to pose, please wave or write in the chat, and we'll be able to give you space to ask a question to our panelists. So first of all, I'd like to, I'm gonna show you our agenda, so you're all able to see what I've just mentioned here. So this is how our meeting will go. We'll have just a short intro on what's the YMCA Youth-led Solution Summit, and then the greetings, and then. So, first of all, you might be asking yourself, what is this Youth-led Solution Summit that everybody is talking about? I will help you with that a little bit with the website of our summit, and I'll explain to you a little bit what is it all about. So you can see here, I'll share it with you. So the Youth-led Solution Summit Climate Action is an action that has been planned and thought of by youth. Our young people in the YMCA have met in San Francisco now a year ago, a bit less than a year ago, and I've decided to address SDGs with specific summits. Of course, back in the day, they wouldn't have thought that this summit would have to be done online rather than in person. The hope was to have it in person, but this is where we are right now, and the challenges that the whole world is facing are the same, so we'll meet online. So what is it? There are solution teams, so teams of young people between 15 and 30 years old all across the world decided to create solutions for the environment. And to do so, they will go through a week of preparation. There will be live events that everyone will be able to join, those on the 19th and the 23rd of October. It will kickstart next Monday. And then they will be accessing workshops and a lot of other support that will allow them to grow their idea and to finally be able to create a whole project that then will be able to be supported through funding. So these young people are very passionate about climate. There's a good few of them right now on Zoom, and they are really eager to hear from you and from your experience as climate activists, as youth organizations that are different and yet so very similar to the YMCA. And for them, for some of them, is their very first experience trying to be activists for a cause, but they feel so strongly for the environment that they have chosen to start right now and to try their strengths in being activists. So without further ado, I would like to let our Secretary General Juan Simões Iglesias to give us a greeting and some good luck that we'll need in this session.
Thank you, Ilenia. Thank you for your welcome and your introduction, all the way from Brussels. And greetings to all of you all the way from Madrid. here in Spain, and thank you so much for joining us, and for saying yes to the call of YMCA Europe and World YMCA and also YMCA USA. It's a privilege, really great to have you all involved from across Europe in this youth-led Solutions Summit on climate action. As Ilenia said, the circumstances that we live in today in Europe and across the world have made us change significantly the format and some of the contents, but definitely not the main goal of the summit. The main goal is not, as the title says, is to share solutions and to share best practices and to share a common concern that we have. You know, somehow over the past 6 months, we have been intensely speaking and being aware of these unexpected challenges that's affecting all of us, which is COVID-19. It's a pandemic, we're causing a dramatic effect on communities among all of us, different parts of Europe, different ages, different social realities. But the reality is that climate itself and the actions against climate have been a pandemic over years, over decades. They have been there, has been there. Some of us have been aware of this issue over the years, over the decades. The YMCA actually has tried to put solutions and to have a strong input to avoid damaging our environment and what's around us, which is our main heritage. And we have a tradition as YMCA, as you know, of giving solutions to what's happening around us in terms of climate. We've been doing that for decades through projects, through initiatives. We invented the camp as an educational activity. We were the first organization actually, and together with the Scout movement, that was able to put in practice camp activities as educational activities in contact directly with nature. But not only that, there's been concern, there's been awareness in our movement at all levels about this issue. Our main message is today, through Eleni and through all of you, the panelists and everyone involved, is to guarantee that we don't forget about climate, even with the huge challenges that we have around us, the social crisis that we live in, the economic crisis, the health crisis, of course, and everything around us, including some of the decisions that governments are taking, institutions, that climate shall still be on the top of our priorities as civil society organizations. If we say that we are inconformists as organizations, let's start by being strong in our inputs when we talk about climate and the effects of what we do on our daily life into climate. So just for this, and with the greetings from our executive committee, President Mike Will and staff team, I wish you all the best. It will be wonderful to listen to your inputs and also to go on next week in the global events. Thank you, Ilenia, and thank you all of you, and blessings to everyone.
Thanks a million, Juan, for your support and your kind words and the perspective given, because as we said, the times in which we're living in are absolutely something that is related to climate, as we have heard many, many times. So I think without further ado, it would be quite important to underline a couple of things. First of all, I can see already there's 36 of us on Zoom, which is a lot. And if you guys if you guys want to see all of the people that are in it so that you can see when people are speaking, please go into your Zoom settings and go on the video. And when you go on the video settings, if you go on the bottom, you can choose to show more than 49 or up to 49 participants so that you can see everybody and you have a chance to really see who's speaking at all times. So that said, I think we should start with our panel. I think we will be joined later by Rosalind. So it could be our start now with Calum from the World Organization of the Scout Movement. And I'm going to show a couple of resources that Calum has made available for us. And please let us know if you're ready, Calum, and we can start.
That is perfect. Thank you very much, Elenia, and thank you, Juan, for that incredible message. And I suppose to start my presentation, I'd like to reiterate that on behalf of WOSM by saying that climate action is a priority. And we live in a world where we need to take action, and we need to take action now. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to kind of tell you a bit about what we do within the Scouts, and thanks for having me here. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So yep, it's nice to meet you all. My own name is Calum Hederman. I'm from County Limerick, which is in the south of the beautiful island of Ireland. I'm delighted to see that there's at least 2 other Irish people here as well. And I'm a youth representative of Scouting in Europe. I work specifically on all things to do with sustainability and climate at an EU level, advocating and lobbying politicians and other youth, young people around the sector to really bring about a cohesive response to what we need to do. Next slide, please. A bit about WOSM. So we're 54 million people in total, from 6 different regions and 171 national scout organizations. As you can see, we've got a few different regions. Myself, I'm from the Europe. Obviously, we have the Inter-American, Eurasia, the Arab region, Africa, and Asia Pacific. And today I'm going to be taking a focus on Europe, but I'm also going to be telling you a bit about our global campaigns and our global initiatives, as well as some of the programs that we do. Next slide, please. So as you can see, although we have 54 million across the world, within Europe itself, we have 2 million Scouts, and that has grown nearly doubled since 20 years ago in 2000. So we're 70 Scout associations, and every different one is so different from one another. Myself, I come from Scouting Ireland, and yeah, so you can see one interesting thing, I suppose, is that we have 70 Scout associations, but there's 40 different countries. And this is because different organizations have different priorities, and they work through different educational methods. And although we work in different ways, we all come together under the Scout law and the Scout method. The next slide, please. Thank you. So I suppose a major value of World Scouting is, and every Scout across the world, is the appreciation and the love for nature. So life in nature is one of the pillars of Scouting, and in particular one of our educational methods. Even Baden-Powell himself in 1907, when he founded our organization, was that the forest is at once a laboratory and a club and a temple for everyone. So over the last 113 years now, we've worked with many different people. I suppose our first real major action towards the environment and taking action to help our climate was with the World Conservation Award, which was developed in partnership with WWF, and that was back in 1970. Next slide, please. So I suppose now to go on to a bit about what we actually do and how we actually create an impact as Scouts. So as you can see, Scouts for SDGs is one of our main programs, and this is the largest coordinated youth contribution to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in total, we have 54 million young people and adults across the globe working on the SDGs and achieving it in their own way. We have a platform called Scouts for SDGs, which actually provides resources and allows people to log on and to log all their activities so that you can go onto it. I'll share, I have a bank of links to send into the chat once I'm finished. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide as well, please. There you'll see that we have a fully developed platform which allows anyone to log on and log their activities that they've done for specific SDGs, and through that we can see the global scale of the impact that Scouts can have on young people. So as you can see, it's it's a circular model that we've used to actually bring about the change. So on one hand, young people become active citizens by taking action in their community, but then as a knock-on effect, the community develops and through the actions of the young people and engage in the wider society. Next slide, please. The next big program that we run, and we've run it for the last 20 to 30 years, is the Better World Framework. So the Better World Framework, as you can see, is a set of different programs. And we've got three main pillars, which is the World Environment Badge, which connects young people with nature through a 16-week program. We have Messengers of Peace, which is a World Peace Award, which is engaging people in SDG13 specifically, and working in their own communities to have interracial, interreligious, and intercommunal dialogue to truly develop the whole Scout method and our achievement towards the SDGs, as well as creating a more inclusive and sustainable way of living in wider society. And then lastly, we have our Scouts of the World Award, which is a 2-year project which challenges Scouts to think in their own way and develop a project that challenges and provides a solution in an innovative way to a community need. The next slide, please. So I suppose to bring you on to our probably biggest program that we do run, and our collective movement, as we like to call it, which is Earth Tribe. So it's saving our planet one challenge at a time. So the Earth Tribe is a global movement of young people working together to protect and preserve nature. And I suppose the most important thing to say here, especially in a setting that isn't with all Scouts, is that it's open to all young people, and that we invite you to join our Earth Tribe. So next slide, please. So with the Earth Tribe, we've got many different pillars, and we've got three main topics that young people work on. So firstly, it's Champions for Nature, and through that we work on nature and biodiversity, and it's all about connecting young people and their leaders and facilitators with nature, and protecting it towards sustainable and inclusive ways, and looking at sustainability and how we act in a conscious manner, not as a complement, but as a fundamental of how we work in our everyday lives and in our scouting. Then we have the Tide Turner Plastic Challenge, which works on everything to do with responsible consumption and how we have an individual as well as a collective responsibility to make better choices and to be more conscious of what we throw away, and how we can reuse it in the future. And then lastly, we have the Scouts Go Solar Challenge, which is all around innovation, and finding different ways in which we can create energy and we can find solutions to community needs. But as well as that, it also reconnects with the whole idea of sustainability as a whole in our society. So there are our three main pillars. And I suppose one final thing was a quote that I pulled down from our Scouts for SDGs website, which was from Manara, a 7-year-old girl who's engaged with the Earth Tribe from the very start, from Zimbabwe. And her quote is, "We all need to love and take care of our planet, because if we don't, people and nature will get sick. Let's keep our planet healthy for everyone." So if you could go on to the final slide, I suppose, just to give a small thing before I sign off and thank everyone. Everyone at World Scouting, I suppose we have a few main things that we like to do. Awareness raising is probably the biggest thing we do, and not only for the people that engage with us, but for the communities that we operate in and for the young people. Another thing is the importance of education. We're an educational movement, we're a non-formal educational movement, just like YMCA. And in that, it's all about instilling young people with a value that they can carry through, whether they continue in their work with the organization or if not. Advocacy is a massive topic that we tackle on a national, a local, European and a global stage, and when it comes to especially environment and climate, but as well as that with EU youth policy, and trying to create spaces, civic spaces that young people can properly participate in. And then lastly, it's ensuring an impact beyond our scope. So although we can create phenomenal shifts globally, it's also about ensuring that young people on the ground in their communities are having an enjoyable and a worthwhile experience. And it's all about mobilizing from the bottom up. So thank you very much. And I'm going to leave you with one quote. Sorry for all the quotes, but it's from back to Baden Powell, our founder. And I think it's very relevant to both the climate we find ourselves in now, which is COVID, as we all sit behind a computer screen, but as well as that when we look at tackling the climate crisis. So it's a scout and a young person is never taken by surprise. They know exactly what to do when anything unexpected happens. So thank you very much. You can see my email, Instagram, and Twitter if you have any questions. And please feel free to reach me there. And I look forward to talking to you all during the panel discussion. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a million, Caleb. That was brilliant and quite inspiring. Just as a flag there, because the Earth Tribe was mentioned, if we're lucky enough, and we'll know at the end of November, we might cooperate also as YMCA to the Earth Tribe in a joint project. So you'll definitely be informed if that happens, and there will be some opportunities open for volunteers there as well. So thanks a million, Caleb, for your contribution. And now next in our panel, we'd like to welcome Lucia Carnelutti from OBESSU, and we'll hope to hear her experience with climate projects and OBESSU's work with that.
Yes, thank you very much for invitation, for inviting me to speak at this panel. It is truly an honor to speak here with so many like-minded people, especially after Caleb and the Scouts, who are truly doing amazing work in this field. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a fancy PowerPoint presentation with me, but I will make sure to leave all the contact details of our organization in the chat as well. So maybe just for the beginning to tell you where I'm from. So my name is Lucia Carnelutti and I'm board member at OBESSU, which stands for Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions. And pretty much we are this really big umbrella organization that represents all European school student unions. So high schoolers and their unions, and we represent them at the European level. So we don't work only within the topic of environment, but we also work in all the topics that have anything to do with school students, from education to social mobility, and so on. So of course, one of the topics that is quite the most relevant at the moment is of course the topic of environmental awareness. And I think this is also because way too often maybe young people have this negative connotation that we are passive and we don't participate, we don't vote, we don't do this and that. And I think that climate fight and environmental awareness has truly shown quite the opposite. It has definitely shown our power, and the fact that we really do not want to be these passive victims of climate change, because I think also the fact that there's so many people here in this panel today really truly shows that we're the last generation that can fight the climate change and that wants to make a change. And this is why we, all the youth, we have to push for recognition of our efforts. We have to secure funds and support from stakeholders in this fight. And I truly believe that through initiatives that were and also will be presented further on this throughout this panel, we can actually truly achieve this. So as I said before, young people had this negative connotation of being passive, and I feel like we all know that probably one of the things that contributes to our fight the most was this initiatives Friday for Future. And I feel like this is also one of the steps where OBESSU and also many youth organizations have started our fight for environmental awareness. And so did OBESSU. From the beginning of Fridays for Future, we were active supporters. We also attended some of the Fridays for Future together with the board, and also truly supported and urged our member organizations to do the same. So I feel like this is where everything started. And then this year, we actually started a project which is called Eco Fighters. And also through that project, and also with many other European organizations, we have also joined a board of Generation Climate Europe. which is the largest coalition of youth-led NGOs at the European level. I don't really want to take too many words, because I know that also Monica from ESSO will probably talk about GC, but maybe just to really briefly show you what GC is. GC pretty much pushes at the European level for stronger action on climate and environmental issues. And our goal is to create this united voice of young people in decision-making processes and climate and environmental issues. And of course, also through our work to empower young people to become active climate advocates. And this is done through different working groups, as well as the organization as a whole. And the working groups are working in the fields of biodiversity, circular economy, clear mobility, and sustainable development goals. So as I already spoke before, OBESSU has also started a really big project this year called Eco Fighters. And the aim of our project, which was unfortunately, as probably many of all the projects of youth organizations at the moment, was kind of cut short and a bit changed due to the coronavirus. But the aim of the project is to promote a culture of environmental awareness and activism in the context of school, student, and apprenticeship organizations through democratic participation of young people in various ways, platforms, and levels. So with the project, we wanted to promote and foster this exchange of best practices, an example in relation to environmental issues and sustainability, and also to build capacities of young people on addressing these environmental challenges from local and national to also European and hopefully global levels. To meet the objectives that we have set for this project, we wanted to include activities that include local, regional, international events with this really strong capacity building focus. The project consists of 3 phases. The first one was regional advocacy seminars that provided the base of all processes, and these events took place in Chisinau, Istanbul, Luxembourg, and Copenhagen. But of course, due to the coronavirus, we were only able to do the first 2. And we really are now looking forward to creating kind of MOOC or any online seminars that could make up also for the last 2 events, because we truly wanted to do these regional events where people from the region could actually step together and address regional problems, not only problems as European Union as a whole. And here also, since we have Monica here, she also participated in one of the events. So I think that's truly an amazing event. I really hope that by the end of the year we can make it work, even though online. So also the second part of this project was supposed to be a summer school, which of course was again cut short due to the coronavirus. And the idea of summer school was to bring all the participants back again together and provide exchange of good practices that they have done after the regional seminars, and also start drafting the action kit for school students to carry out initiatives regarding environmental awareness. And lastly, the final part of the plan was, and also is, because we're going to realize this in January, to carry out the Impact Week / month that brings pretty much the fruit of previous processes. And it is a moment when participants of the seminar and of the summer school put their plans into concrete actions. This will also to be made possible with micro-granting scheme, because we wanted our members to have opportunity to implement local and national activities that take their advocacy to the next level. And idea of having this also a Impact Week, to have really a lot concentration of a lot of different events at the same week, is to also strengthen each other's messages. So to have this really a lot of smaller events throughout Europe, because only this way we can also show how much voice the young people actually have and how much we do care about this really important topic, and that we actually fight for our future. And after this, we're also planning to put out a position paper of organization on the topic. And we really truly hope that our work won't be set back by coronavirus anymore. But even if it will be, I believe that the climate fight is one of the fights that young people, we don't have any obstacles to fight it, and we'll continue fight it until we truly do achieve our final goal. So this is really shortly something about what OBESSU does on the topic of environment. And I really hope that maybe we see you at some of the either events or some of the initiatives together, and that we fight this fight together. And as I said before, I'm going to put my contact information and more information about OBESSU in the chat, so you can look us up, you can send us an email or any questions if you want to collaborate or just see what we're up to. So thank you very much again for inviting me, and I'm giving the floor back to Elena.
Thanks a million, Lucia, especially thank you for leaving your contacts there. Maybe if any information that can be given about the events, I think people will be happy to join. I'll take this small opportunity to give a shout out to all those who are following us from all over the world. We've been receiving greetings from Scotland, Kosovo, Colombia, Mexico, Mongolia, and Ireland, and the World YMCA and YMCA in Ireland. So hello to you all, and they're definitely following this discussion with great interest, and it's a great opportunity for all of them to hear from you and from your work. And now, in a way that we really love at the European level, we go from the European level to the more national and more volunteer side. So from OBESSU to ESU, and we give word to Monica.
Hello, nice to meet you all. My name is Monica, and I am in the executive committee of something called the European Students' Union. It's quite similar to OBESSU, but for tertiary education students. So our members are 40 countries' national union of students. If you're in a university, probably one of our members have a local member there. So umbrella of tiny umbrellas. We have been on a bit of a journey, I think, in ESU, from being an education-focused NGO that thought that this is what we are good at, and we will leave all the green stuff to the green organizations. Sure, the world is on fire, but someone else will have to deal with that because we're doing education over here. To slowly starting to change that mindset and actually realizing that the people we represent and the students and young people whose rights we are fighting for are going to be gravely impacted by the fact that the world is on fire. So it became a part of our considerations about living conditions of our members, and became a more natural part of thinking about our members' interests. Then what we did was we formed climate policy, and we joined with other organizations into lobby platforms to try to make impact on the climate and biodiversity agenda. But we've also felt that it's not really enough that we have a few resolutions, as we call our policy papers, that deal specifically with climate change. I mean, this is necessary because this is how I can go to meetings and say that we care about it, but it's also not enough. We need also to mainstream it into all the different things that we do, so that it doesn't become this add-on to our activities, but it's actually a natural part of all the other things that we do. And this has been a really interesting process over the last 2 years to think about, in the things that we are good at, which is fighting for education quality and for broader access to learning for all types of people, combating the inequality in the education system, and thinking about how education is a driver for change in society, and using that as a way of thinking about what education needs to contain and live up to. This is what we're good at, and this is what we've always been doing. Now, how does that look through an education lens? So we started thinking about quality of learning as also quality of equipping you to be a sustainable citizen and act democratically in society and take responsibility for a sustainable society. And this means we're transforming our way of thinking about what education quality really means, which is also really needed because we were already quite tired of all these discourses about learning just being something that you do to get a job and not something that is supposed to help you be better in society and move the world forward and make the world better. So we found a way of fitting this naturally into a way of talking about education quality. And this then has, I mean, very boring direct policy consequences, like our opinions about the quality assurance systems of education and what types of learning outcomes should be ensured and these types of things. But it comes from really thinking about what is our purpose as an organization and how do we mainstream sustainability into that. And now it's in a lot of our different policy areas. So when we think about students' housing conditions or transportation or living conditions of students, we think about it not just as a short-term thing that has to fulfill the needs of the student, but something that has to also take into consideration the effect on a broader society and the effect on sustainability. And it's a really healthy thing that we are starting to consider this into all the different things that we do. Another thing that it has brought us is that we are getting all these partnerships, for example, with OBESSU in Generation Climate Europe, as was mentioned, where we are collaborating together with other young people in different ways than the types of projects we would normally do. And this has also been really healthy for us as an organization because we are learning to see how we fit in the puzzle of moving this agenda forward. Because I really think if we're going to move this thing, it takes a bunch of scouts and it takes a bunch of students and it takes probably a million other types of youth organizations to each bring this that they are good at and sort of kick from that angle. I might be biased because I was a scout for a long while myself, but I really think that we have different toolboxes that we need to put into the mix, and ESSO is trying to learn how we fit into that on a European level. Generation Climate Europe is not very old. It's only a bit more than a year now since we started organizing together in this way, but we're also bringing the agenda into other older umbrellas that we're part of, such as the European Youth Forum, such as the Lifelong Learning Platform, and really thinking about how all these different ways of working together need to think about sustainability into themselves. I also promised to mention something that I do on a national level, which is something I would encourage you to try and copy. It's a really handy tool. It is to form a youth climate council. We kind of forced our minister by taking a journalist and interviewing the minister and asking him if he wouldn't love to have a climate council made of young people so we could give him policy inputs. And it's always awkward to say no when you're on camera, so he had to agree. So now we have a channel to write down the legislation proposals that young people want, and we gather those from as many youth organizations as we can. And then we write these really technical papers and we give them to the climate ministry. And it's a really handy supplement to all the striking and shouting and media work that we also have to do, because we can sort of combine the concrete solution-oriented types of work with the enormous amount of public pressure and shouting that is really also necessary to make politicians do anything. And we think this type of a synergy has been really useful, at least in Denmark. And it's something that we are now also talking with everyone else that we can get our hands on and telling them, hey, you should try this out in your country and see if it's somehow a tool you can use. It won't stand on its own. I don't think giving papers and drinking coffee with the minister in itself would have been useful. But because we are doing it in collaboration with still talking to the people who are striking and shouting, then this sort of gives some type of an added value that can be really interesting, at least in my national context. So I think that was the things I wanted to share, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Monica. I think we're really lucky today because all of you are presenting very different aspects and very different levels of climate work. So thank you very much, because I'd say from your smaller, local YMCA, or even from a national one that hasn't worked on it before, it must be a struggle to think, where do I start from? At what level can I be more effective? So it's really, really cool to know as much as possible and see different levels to see where one can fit. So talking about this, I'd love to give the floor next to Valerie and Alicia, which I think you're both organized between each other, who talks first and who covers what. But this is an example of beautiful collaboration. We have said this in the European team hangout for the youth-led solutions as well. It's very important to work together and find your allies, and because everybody does things, as Monica said, in a different way, and everyone has their own toolbox, and beauty is achieved when two very different toolboxes work together, and as Alicia and Valerie will show. So I'll leave the floor to you, girl.
Thank you. So I suppose I'll give some background, and I'll start us off and then throw it over to Valerie. So it could be going back and forth a little bit, kind of like a bit of tennis. You'll have to keep watch. But yeah, so just to give background of stuff I've done around climate, I'm on the National Youth Council of Ireland Young People's Committee, which Valerie obviously is representing the National Youth Council of Ireland today. I'm a co-founder of World War Zero, which is a climate initiative created by former US Secretary of State John Kerry. I'm part of a Stop Ecocide International, which is about bringing ecocide into law in every country around the world, basically, not a big ask. And now I'm officially working with YMCA Cork, which is in my region, as part of YMCA Ireland. And I've kind of come full circle because I used to be a young person, just like all of you. Well, I still am a young person, but a young activist who was learning from YMCA and learning from people speaking to me and educating me and helping me learn new skills and learn new things. The YMCA was the first place that I ever learned about the SDGs. So now I feel like I've come full circle as I'm here today. So I'm here really to talk about the Climate Justice Fund, which is in Ireland. I'll give a little bit of background as to how that came about. Of course, through YMCA and through these non-formal structures like Scouting Ireland and all of these amazing organisations, climate has been a huge topic. I was Ireland's youth delegate to the first UN Youth Climate Summit last year, and Valerie at the time was Ireland's youth delegate for the UN, two separate positions, but sound very similar. And when we were there, obviously for the summit, we were alongside our Minister for Children and Youth Affairs at the time, our Minister for Environment, and it was just, you know, the event in itself, hearing about what other countries were doing to, you know, create youth engagement and youth participation was huge for us, because we were able to say, well, if this country like Denmark are doing it, why can't we do it? So there, you know, came time where we had discussions. I was lucky enough to be in a room with the Minister for Children and the Minister for Environment at the time, and a former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, who is an amazing climate activist as well. I highly suggest looking her up. And similar to Monica, it was sort of an ambush situation. There was lots of conversations around the climate justice area in terms of young people and young participation, and Mary Robinson was very strongly advocating for young people to learn through non-formal structures and also formal structures about the Sustainable Development Goals and climate justice and climate action. And you know, it shocked this activist and lady, an amazing advocate, when I told her that my first time learning about the SDGs was through YMCA and not through school, which, you know, says a lot about both. So again, at that table, there was kind of a promise made that, you know, we would be looking into it. And I'll let Valerie then talk from her side in her position of UN Youth Delegate and the work that they did towards maintaining that highly kind of ambitious idea. And then again, within that, the Climate Youth Council idea, the Climate Justice Fund, all came about. And in October, this was September, in October of that year, a Climate Justice Fund of €2 million was allocated in our budget for youth organisations to, you know, non-formal structures like YMCA and Froiga, which is another one in Ireland, and Scouting Ireland, to get this funding and to create projects, which Valerie and myself will talk about again a bit later. And again, a little bit for the Climate Youth Council. I had already met with Monica to discuss this. Again, I was probably way ahead of my in my head, but this has been, unfortunately, because of an election that took place here in Ireland. It's kind of been pushed back a bit, and obviously now with COVID as well. But it is happening, I've been assured. But it certainly will. And at least that we have the promise that it will be happening. So I'll hand over to Valerie now.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. I mean, I feel the same a little bit, the whole idea of full circle. I've been a climate activist for quite a long time, or an activist in general on equality and justice for quite a long time. So I grew up in non-formal youth sector. And now to see myself actually working with an the National Youth Council once more, it's almost full circle on what we've done. So yes, at the time where, which was actually last September, can we believe it, at the climate summit. So like Alicia said, so the idea came to us when we were asked as youth activists from Ireland, what do you think we should do to support the movement that young people have already raised? So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, because as a UN youth delegate, most of the time whenever we spoke to young people, what they said is young people were already on the street, young people already had ideas, young people already had demands that they were doing. So what really necessarily was needed was support, and of course the Climate Council that we're still fighting for, and I would love to see the day where Ireland will get that one day. So that's where the idea of the Climate Justice Fund came. And the reason it's actually called the Climate Justice Fund, not just a Climate Action Fund, is because we really wanted to reiterate that young people are not just asking for any climate action out there. They're asking for fairer climate action, for climate action that would actually make a difference, not just to the problem of environment, but recognizing that climate change is actually a systemic issue that needs to be solved, not just by putting our action there, but recognizing where everyone in society is. So that kind of gives you an idea of where, once we actually got the victory of having a climate justice fund, which is like so amazing that an entire, like in the Department of Children and Youth Affairs actually dedicated funding for an environmental issue. And so that was such a welcome step from the department to support young people in their endeavor in climate justice. So as Alicia said, many other different organizations in the country got the funding. They are all also working on the project, which is great because we're tackling climate justice from all different angles. And so what we decided to do at the National Youth Council was to really, again, use the power of partnership to enhance what we're doing. So not just doing things on our own, but really taking advantage of other people that are already playing a part out there, other voices. Specifically, what we realized as well was when it comes to climate change, most of the time you don't, there's voices that are missing, and we're very interested to bring to the front the voices that were missing. In the case of Ireland, that would be the discourse of like, marginalized community, young people specifically were targeted. We also wanted to include the voices of young people from rural area, and specifically the like young people from farming backgrounds, because as you will know, when it comes to our greenhouse gas emission in Ireland, the farming industry sector kind of holds a big piece. But we wanted, within that framework of climate justice, we wanted the voices of young people from the farming community to also be heard as such, instead of being just completely judged at all times. So this is where the Future Generation Project comes from. So it's a collaboration of actually 5 different organizations. So YMCA Cork is there, Spirit 17, Macron Pharma, Swan and Swan Youth Services, and Involve Youth Services. So we also have young people from the traveling community in Ireland also involved in this. So what can we say about this project? Again, once again, the strength was about collaboration, was about the voices that are missing, and it was also about reaching the people that have the furthest, or the people that are the young people that were hard to reach in terms of the talk about climate justice. So we've been working on this project for how many months already? Completely gone off my head with the months. I think we started in June. And at the moment, so each organization is working together with offer trainings, but also, and we have a steering group where everyone comes in and actually talk about the different issue, but individually as well, the organization have their own project that they're working on. So some of the examples of the project is, like, for example, our Involve group, they're targeting what is the role of media in climate justice. So they're asking questions such as who writes about climate justice, who's missing from the conversation, and what else is needed to bring those voices in. So one of the findings that they've already found is that the media doesn't write on climate change for young people. They write about young people, usually striking, but never writing to inform young people. And I asked the question to one of the young person, and he answered, because I read it and I didn't think it was for me. So simple as that, and then making an advocacy project behind it. Some of the group are also targeting looking into how do we actually encourage or the agriculture sector to actually take more sustainable practices, including them? How do we support them so we're not adding burdens to them? And then some of the issues that we're talking about is about pollution. They're looking into pollution, but not just in Ireland, but also in the global south. It's like, what is the effect of our pollution here, but what is the effect of the broader pollution question in terms of the global south versus the global north? And I'm going to let Alicia tell you a little bit about what YMCA are doing themselves about their project. But one of the learnings as such, an invitation as well, is that by talking with young people from all these different backgrounds, one of the elements that they found very much is that actually, can everybody afford to be sustainable? So they've asked that question because they realize that there's some other people have more barriers in order. It's not about not wanting to be more sustainable, but it's about have they enough resources? And even the idea of affordability in terms of time. Does other young people have can afford the time to dedicate to learning more about sustainability? So in that, I'd actually like to plug in, like, we are having a webinar on that question of can everybody afford to be green, that is going to be led by the young people from the steering group committee of the future generation. So you are all more than welcome to come and give your opinion, also contribute, because I think it's not just an Irish problem, it's a global problem. So if we can all have a conversation about that, that would also be very, very great. Yeah, Alicia, do you want to say something?
Thanks, Valerie. Yeah, I'll just give a little brief about what the group down in YMCA Cork are doing, which I'm helping out with. I know Valerie spoke about a group that had picked their topic. We're still deciding on what to pick. The group are, because it's difficult to pick a topic. Like, when you speak about all the issues, and then when you start talking about them, more issues come out of those issues, and it can also be quite draining to talk about these things. So we are taking it one step at a time. But what will happen with this group is that when they do decide on a project which has some sort of solution, they're going to get €500 each to develop this project, which is quite interesting. Because, you know, when you think about that, you're like, wow, like, what can I do with, you know, money to actually try and bring this solution to life and help people? And again, ties into the whole element of it, which is climate justice. And I mean, it comes down to helping people, and like Valerie was saying, the marginalized groups. And I was going to say as well, but Valerie, you said it all. It's a very interesting question. Can everyone afford to be green? And something we should all think about. I live in rural Ireland, and it's quite difficult to change how the power in your house is to buy an electric car. It's extremely expensive, and there's a lot more issues than just those sort of ones, and I know that. So it's a very interesting question. Again, would promote coming along to the webinar, because it'll be a day to discuss all of that and to discuss you know, because everything is connected to climate change and climate justice and social justice, and it's an extremely important element. So if Valerie, if you want to come in again, or
yeah, one last thing actually that I forgot to say about the uniqueness again of the project is that even though we're working with young people of the different organization, but we're actually working at all different levels of the organization. So for example, when we had our training, we didn't just have the young people, we had young people, youth workers, and directors of the organization as well. So very much to make sure that the impact of the climate justice that we're talking about it's not just about young people taking action, but youth workers supporting them, but also by including the like head of orgs, we're also hoping that climate justice will become part of the organization policies and stuff. So like Monica said, that it's not enough to just like have action outside, but how can we actually make it mainstream in all aspects of our organization, so it becomes just part and parcel with what we're fighting for. So that's another good point that I forgot to mention about the project. Thank you very much, though, and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks a million, Valerie and Alicia. This was a really cool conversation. Always the conversation style interventions in a webinar are so interesting because we get to see so many more aspects, and I guess for people it's also more human and nice to listen to. And so thanks a million for your intervention. It was so interesting to see an action on the ground that could actually give a more practical grasp to our participants on, you know, what can they do. And that was really interesting to see how partnership can really bring something really cool. Another thing you mentioned, climate justice, so important. YMCA participated to COP25, and there was they streamed every day from it, and the discussion about climate justice and the concept of justice and the relationship between social justice and climate issues was something that made everyone passionate. And also in the Euro team hangout that we had this week twice, this came out as well. Countries, in our case, countries that are facing stronger challenges. We have countries in our teams that are facing conflict right now, or former conflicts, and that have, you know, budgets that are, you know, quite challenged by a lot of things already. And we were asking ourselves, you know, can the solutions that we're proposing fit into that as well? So I'll take this opportunity as well to present a little bit the teams to you, so that you know a little bit your audience. As I mentioned before, between our participants today, there are people from YMCA Kosovo, YMCA Ukraine, YMCA Russia, YMCA Palestine, YMCA France, and YMCA Ukraine. And I'm sure I mentioned somebody twice and I forgot somebody. Please write in the comments if I'm forgetting anyone. And so all of these young people have been listening to you and to your amazing Wales and Scotland. I forgot about you, and you can absolutely be mad at me for that. And Norway as well, we have today. And so I would like to ask you if you have any questions to our panelists. So to the youth-led solution teams, I wanted to ask, does any of you have a question for our panelists? Please wave or write in the comments and I'll unmute you straight away. Do we have anyone here with a question? Please, Marius, feel free to flag it if I don't see it, because definitely I'm gonna miss it. Juan has a question. Go for it, Juan.
Thank you. Maybe I kick off. I'm the older guy. I'm the older one, so I have it's easier. Thank you so much. It was really great, as you said, Ilenia, to listen to all the panelists and the experiences and the grassroots work, and also an opportunity to thank you, Marius, for the technical assistance that you're giving to all of us. Just a comment and a question. It's a reality that when it comes to recovery from the situation that we're experiencing now of the pandemic, most of the recovery would actually be on the shoulders of the new generation of young people, and this is a reality. Experts say that the recovery will take time ahead of us. It will take years ahead of us, and therefore, especially organizations that work with young people or have a youth focus have a huge responsibility in the steps forward. So the question would be, when it comes to recovery, how would you see our institutions and and the public bodies also taking climate action as a priority in the framework of recovery? It's clear that the world has stopped, and somehow we are resetting. We are resetting things. There's a new perspective on the future, and we are reflecting on how the future will look like. From your experience, for what you're listening in your countries, and also you are debating in your organizations, how do you see that we will be able to really put climate action in the picture when it comes to the recovery from this health, economic, and social crisis that we're living now? And anyone who would like to somehow answer or give input. Difficult to choose one of just one because
Monica?
you were, that's great in the inputs.
Maybe Monica wants to.
Yeah, I can do that. It's a really important question because we have these several crises happening at the same time, and it can kind of go two ways when this happens. Some politicians are using it already as an excuse, saying, oh, then the whole sustainability thing will have to wait because we have all of this urgent stuff with the health right now. And then others, and especially young people, because we know in the end we pay for both of the results, we are more focused on finding synergy solutions and ways to kill two birds with one stone. So in the Danish case, we've made this whole long list of types of climate action that are necessary, that just so happen also to create a lot of jobs in the short term. And then we've been pushing that to the minister, who then did a very small amount of those. We would have liked more investment, but simply arguing that it's cheap to spend money right now, and you need actually to spend money right now to produce economic activity and solve the short-term problems that we have from the corona. Why not do that in a way that doesn't fund business as usual and giving money to the airlines and everyone else to go back to normal, when we have this whole expensive to-do list of job-producing climate action that we could get to? So we've been trying with this, with sort of medium results. And the same in the education sector. I mean, there's a lot of reskilling and upskilling that needs to be invested in now, at the same time as people just happen to be losing a lot of jobs in the not so sustainable sectors. It would really be a golden point in time to then fund people's reskilling and upskilling and ensure just transition. Whether we can get politicians to do that, we're not quite sure, but we're trying.
Just to give everyone the heads up, because sometimes we have our own Brussels lingo, the just transition, just in very simple word, it means how do we transition from the current economy to a fairer economy that is fairer to the environment, but also to the people that are, experiencing a harder situation in terms of jobs, in terms of living conditions, and etc. And reskilling is a very important topic that Monica mentioned. It's being treated at every level, also by the unions and also from the businesses in Europe, because it's a really tough thing actually to get. Some countries do that very, very well. The Nordic countries have a long tradition of reskilling people, and it's part of their flex security model, where maybe it's easier to hire and fire, but there's also a strong state action in getting people retrained. And many countries are trying to catch up with that at the moment, because it seems to be quite useful in, as you know, there's many scientific progress that is happening. So of course, skills that were useful yesterday might not be tomorrow. And also it's hard for the formal education sector to teach those skills, maybe in schools where school programs are submitted to the political will sometimes of governments and are really hard to reform without some resistance from other from a lot of stakeholders. So thanks a million, Monica, for your answer. Any other question from our participants to our panelists? Any curiosity you have about the challenges they had during their projects? You can raise your hand or write in the comments. Oh, Anastasia, you are on with a question.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for all information that we got today. So it was really interesting. I'm sorry if I missed the information what I'm asking for, but just anyway. How do you use social media, like social nets, like Instagram or Facebook, to promote ecological habits and to promote to be more eco-friendly? Or which is more powerful way to use them, actually? What do you think?
Do we have a volunteer from the panelists to answer this question?
I'll come in.
Yeah.
I've probably started using Instagram when it was when I was legally allowed to in Ireland anyway, when I was 13. But back then when I was involved in activism, but not so much with organizations like YMCA and different organizations here in Ireland, it was very important to first of all I suppose engage young people who might not be in the realm of what that work was. So obviously all of us here today are really interested in climate change, really interested in climate action. We're the ones who will Google it or look for it or ask someone, whereas there's a realm of people outside of that who will not go looking for it. But if they do see it, they could be interested, or it could be the first time they've ever seen something like that. So I personally think social media is extremely important in getting that message across and creating content as well, with a purpose, which is what YMCA would have done with us when we would have done videography and photography and upskilling our communication, because I mean, it's great to be educated and informed. That's like the first principle, but then communicating that to others, and those who you obviously want to create the change, whether it's a politician or you're talking to media, communication skills are absolutely vital. So that's my input on that.
Thanks a million, Alicia. Do we have any other question from the participants to the panelists? Or any other answer regarding the use of social media in your campaigns, probably, if some of the other panelists. Yes, Caleb.
I think I'd like to jump in as well on Juan's point about how we can actually bring about the change that we need to see. And I was really delighted to hear when you mentioned the term a just transition, because I think it's really important for us to really dive deeper into what climate action is, and what it actually looks like. And we look at it, we can use the overall concept is called sustainability. And when people hear sustainability, like Alicia had mentioned and Monica, is that it's consistently thought of as this type of complemented idea of environmentalism, when really there's so many socioeconomic impacts. When we look at the title, like when we look at social justice, like Valerie spoke about, and when we look at equality and economic growth and innovation. And I think my 2 cents on it, and it might be a bit bizarre, but I think that education is the key to how we move forward. And I think that we have an opportunity within education, whether it be formal, non-formal, informal, or any form of education, to instill the value of sustainability among the next generation of young people and the current generation of young people. And when we talk about the idea of reskilling, it was interesting to see that Juan had mentioned that he thinks he's the old guy in the room, when really we're all here making a contribution to how we can live our lives and how we can move forward sustainably. So I think the whole way we can move forward is through innovation and through education. But as well as that, I think we really need to make the vital changes in our own communities, because it can only start from the ground up. And once we start seeing changes on a local level, and like for one example is like I'll use a personal story is in Ireland we have local authorities which govern each region of Ireland, and traditionally young people are never would be seen in these spaces. And recently I put my name forward for election and luckily I was elected. But it was crazy to attend my first committee meeting there only last week, where the second youngest person was 42 years of age. And we expect to make these sustainable changes, and we speak about how young people can really make the change. And it's from politicians saying that young people can make the change, but we're not in the civic spaces. And I think the Climate Youth Council, like Monica had spoke about, is incredible. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be in the civic spaces to actually make that change. We shouldn't be seen as a complement. We're not a complement. We're a part of society. And I think that through education and through innovation, that young people can really create the change.
Thanks a million, Caleb. And that's absolutely something that we have discussed also in our Hero on Gout team, like what are the levels of change, right? And what, you know, sometimes there has been a narrative where that weight has been put on the individual. We have discussed that a lot, where, so the question that our teams were asked to answer to was like, do you believe that's enough, or no, or at what level change should happen? And you were very right, Caleb and Monica and Lish and Valerie and Lucia, to highlight there's so many different levels. And it's true that these levels can look a little bit hard to achieve, but what our volunteers told us the other day is like, you know, sometimes some countries might have a true hard time to put in the muscle power of funds they don't have, or of means they don't have. And that's where actually our volunteers felt most empowered. Figure it out. That's incredible. Like what they were saying to us is that they felt like that responsibility, then it's on me. I'm fair, but this is what I'm working with at the moment. I'll be curious to know if any of our participants would like to ask any other question or intervene on this. Let me see, anyone waving any other question to our panelists? I don't see any, but let me know, Marius, if you see any hand up. In the meantime, though, I truly wanted to ask you a question on this topic we were just discussing. Where did you find the biggest challenges to your work in bringing the climate topic onto the table at a local, national, or international level? Where did you find a hurdle, and how did you jump it? Or how did you put it down? Or how did you circle it? Anyone wants to answer? Valerie.
I mean, I think where do you come? Where is the hurdle? The hurdle is that starts with you, and then that starts with what people put out there for you. In terms of what do I mean by you? Like Caleb said, like the actions will come if we all put ourselves in those civic spaces and actually start questioning, being real participants. I don't agree with Aristotle in many things, but one thing I agree with him is what his definition of what a citizen is. A citizen is not a person that can vote once 5 years. A citizen is a person that recognize that in order for my country, in order for the world to move, to be in a better place, I have a role to play. I have a voice. I have something that I can bring that doesn't necessarily just stuck themselves into somebody else is doing it. The politicians are doing the things. What is your role in that? So one of the first hurdles is to recognize that you have a role to play. as such. And once you do that, then you can go into those rooms and actually, when you're told, actually, you're too young for this, which has happened many, many a times. I mean, I've been an activist since I'm 12 years old. So people have been telling me for about 20 years of my life that I'm inadequate, and I still knock on doors and I still tell them, well, this inadequate person will tell you what she thinks because she has the right to say it. So, I mean, in terms of one of the hurdle of even getting people to accept or want to talk about climate change is actually why I took the framework of climate justice, reminding people that this is a systematic problem. So like you asked the question earlier on, in this time of COVID even, how do we make sure that climate change is not dropped out of the table, that people can think about, oh, we have to deal with this crisis and deal with another crisis later, is by reminding people once again that climate change is a systemic issue. That if you look at the statistics of even the cases of people that are more affected by COVID, you can see the link between COVID and pollution. Where do you think that's coming from? So if people care about solving COVID, then we have to care about climate justice. If you think people are thinking about the healthcare system, it's only now that we're realizing that our healthcare system have been broken, that some people have better healthcare system or access to it than others. And now we're recognizing that power. How did we get to that society that is so divided? Again, systemic issues. So making someone relate to that problem that is close to their heart, and then being like, well, you see, that same problem is exactly what's at play here with climate justice and with climate change, and making them then realize that. Like, I think that's another hurdle. How do we make it relevant for everyone? How do we make people care about it? And I think it's always about tapping into how this person is affected in the current system that we live, and then making them see that if you're fighting for one systemic issue, you have to fight for all of it. And unfortunately, in today's world, we've created silos instead of actually working together. And one of the major power that we have is if we start recognizing that these things cannot be dealt in silos, we have to connect them. And we've seen it when you're hearing about Black Lives Matter, racial justice. You can link that very well to think, if you care about Black Lives Matter, you have to care about climate change as well at the same time. So that's my advice on how I managed to overcome some of the hurdles that I found in this program.
You can sum it up by saying being intersectional, right? I see George has a question. George.
Sorry, it wasn't a question. I was just clapping for Valerie.
I didn't see it.
I was
Well,
just
good.
applauding Valerie. That was very, very great.
Thanks a million, George. You have a question maybe to ask? No?
No, not really.
Good, thank you. There's a clap from Monica as well. And now I see it well. It's not a wave. Any other question for our panels? Let me see. You can ask anything, guys. It doesn't have to be related necessarily to the projects they have done, but if you have a suggestion to ask for your own projects, a doubt, for example, will it work, will it not work? Am I having the right idea? You can definitely and should definitely ask to our panel, since they've seen it all. Yes, Caleb.
I suppose I just wanted to like quickly was that in my presentation that I gave, I spoke a lot about the global perspective. And I suppose maybe if I'd gone further down on the list, I would have realized maybe to take a bit of a more local setback to kind of really give more of a contribution to everyone that's working on it. So if you'd like, I could give like a quick, like,
yes,
brief,
go for it. Absolutely.
So I was kind of searching for the best example that I thought might really help. And one was one that I suppose really shows the ethos and the message of Scouting, which is the whole idea of being able to adapt to one's circumstances given any opportunity or any situation they're placed in. So I'm not sure if many of you heard about the Dalmatia fires in Croatia, which caused 65,000 trees to be burnt devastatingly. But what's really inspiring that's come from the story, and it's been switched to quite a positive message, is that the project Baranka was started, which was started by a local scout group in Croatia that was located very near to the fire. And it started with just 25 volunteers. And what happened was that they went out and collected black ash and they stored it in their scout hall to try and think of different ways. And I think this really ties into the innovative side of what I was speaking about earlier. But what has turned around now in the space of a year is that now there's 65,000 trees planted where the fires took place. But as well as that, all the black ash that was collected was turned into crayons, and they were given I think it was the figure was 100,000 crayons were donated to schools, preschools, and nurseries, made out of the one ingredient of the black ash. And from this, young people drew a picture of a tree and uploaded online. So now not only is there one forest with 65,000 new trees that have grown, but there's also a virtual forest online with a further 100,000 trees that young people have come together. And it was all free of charge to citizens. It was all done volunteer led. And I think the real message is that it started with a small group of 8 to 18-year-olds taking action in their own community because of the terrible effects of climate change. But it was turned around into such a positive message where now we have more green life. And obviously it's an awful event to occur, but that we have an opportunity to take events like that. And I think it's the very same as the COVID-19 crisis, where it is all obviously it's a negative, and the loss of so many people is devastating. But I think we need to use it as an opportunity to change, and need to use it as an opportunity to transition to a more environmentally friendly world, because we have the opportunity to change now. So yeah, that's a kind of an example.
Thanks a million, Calum. I had mentioned, I think, that project in Croatia, because I remember hearing about it at a presentation last year at the yearly Scout reception, and that I thought it's a great example to see how most probably those first 25 Scouts would have never thought that they would have reached 65,000 trees planted. Never ever. But sometimes if you speak, as Valerie said, if you touch the chord, right? If you get to what people really care about and you get them on board, the results can be incredible. And going back on the COVID topic that was raised by Kwan and that all of you have touched upon in your presentations and in your interventions, it's quite true that right now a lot of countries feel like a hammer is going to fall on us right after the COVID crisis, and we can already see that the fight over funding has started at the European level. There's the multi-annual financial framework, so say the money available for the next 7 years has already been shaped onto a recovery fund for COVID purposes, and a lot of civil society, parts of civil society are now striving to achieve that just transition. We are here in Brussels at the moment talking about reskilling. We are talking about keeping the funding for youth through Erasmus+, but we have already seen how the narrative is kind of shifting there. The funding for Erasmus+ was supposed to triple, and right now is, not even doubling. So it's troubling to see. We can see that some actors are sticking up for us, like the European Parliament. They are still fighting to keep at least a doubling. That would be fantastic. But it's incredible to see how a moment of panic can really get the countries to backtrack, while there was an economic crisis in 2008 that showed very well that austerity is not the answer. And still countries seem, to struggle to learn the lesson, but we can only hope that our voices will get stronger. That's an important part of that. All of your work, all of the work that our solution teams are going to be doing are going to make the issue of climate visible. It's going to be clear for decision makers by seeing all these actions at a local, national, and international level, that we haven't forgotten about the topic, that for us, this topic is absolutely linked to the realities of new challenges like COVID, and that we're now backtracking on it, that we're not accepting the narrative that it needs to be set aside. I think I mentioned in our, even in our agenda, European work on climate versus global, because often in Europe we hear the narrative that, you know, Europe is fine. Europe doesn't have to think about climate change because, you know, there's no tornadoes now in Europe. There's no tsunamis. So these have been, I'm directly quoting decision makers from some countries. I won't make names because in Italy we say name the sinner, not the sinners. But there's plenty of sinners that have said things like this. And so I wanted your perspective because we are absolutely graced to have in our, between our participants, people who come from countries who are not members of the European Union, who are European, and some that come with from countries that actually might be directly affected by the most dramatic changes. And there's people who are following us on the Facebook Live that are absolutely in the eye of the hurricane, if you know what I mean, because they see climate change happening every day and the devastating consequences. Have you encountered this narrative? Why should Europe be concerned, and why, and how can we as European activists for climate bring the urgency as well? Because sometimes we have been painted as the fact that we are fighting somebody else's fight, which is a very uncomfortable position to be in, you know, some kind of savior of the global south. And I guess this has been a struggle also for you to bring in your work. Do you have anything to answer to that? Yes, Alicia.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that narrative, and I'm gonna think that probably everyone on the panel has. I remember just a quick story. A year ago, or probably more than a year ago, they tried to develop a plastics factory in my town. And of course I thought this was outrageous, which it is. And anyway, my community came together, and it's quite a small, again, like I said earlier, rural community, and raised the funds to bring this this company to the High Court in my country. And before they were kind of at court, and that kind of ruling was dealt with, I spoke at an event in front of 30 small island nations from across the world. And I felt so guilty because I brought this story that was happening at the time into my speech, and you know, telling and trying to speak that about, like, local is global. Why is this happening? Why should we be building plastics factories when places like the Marshall Islands are half submerged in water? Like, why are we now preaching about climate action and policy and legislation, but then things like this are happening and slipping through the system every single day? And I was outraged, and I felt so guilty that I had to stand in front of these small island nations and speak about these awful developments that were happening only within 20 kilometers of where I live. And like, it was just, it was outrageous. And anyway, our Taoiseach, which is our vice prime minister at the time, was there, and he was asked by media, how is this happening? Why is this happening, this plastics factory? And it'll stick in my mind what he said. Oh, we must trust our planning permission sectors. We must trust these people. I was like, how can we trust them when this is being allowed to happen? Like, obviously things need to really change. And thankfully it didn't happen, and it was fought and won. But this is a message of communities coming together, not waiting for top-down action. Don't wait for the politicians to come and say, oh, we're going to change this, because let me tell you something, it will never happen. Definitely not in Ireland anyway. So the community-based approach, which happened quite naturally in my area, and it was of great importance. And we still had people who didn't agree with it, who thought, you know, we were crazy, but we were still the majority, and we won. And it's a great example of how a community, a very rural, small community, who wouldn't have a lot of money, can create significant change and stop something of such a degree.
Thanks a million, Alicia. I think this has definitely appeared in our discussion with our solution team's leader. I remember Emmanuel from France, especially naming, something very, very true at a European level. There's many of our countries, and I put myself in it because I'm from Italy originally. We kind of have this perception, the state will take care of this, right? This is not my job. This is not my responsibility. Well, there's definitely all the time things that are happening in our own communities that we can work on and that we can definitely have an input on. And that went into that talk about personal activism, especially in those countries where that's not visible. And it was so important. We had a volunteer from Palestine also saying, it's truly hard to talk to my people in my community about this is a problem when, they kind of unleash on me a long list of other problems that are all absolutely true. But she said that doesn't stop me from saying, this is still important. You're not going to change my mind. So I think this is our superpower. This is your superpower that we can count on each and every one of the young people in our organization to, stand up for what's right. And to be active for it. Lucia, I think wanted to talk. Did you raise your hand, Lucia?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly that I think I completely agree here with Alicia. But I think that what is so unique about this climate fight is that, yes, in Europe and also youth-led initiatives, we might be doing someone else's job, but this is not doing someone else's homework for the sake of them not being caught, but this is for the sake of the entire class. I mean, we're the first time that we're in this position that it is not something that a region can mess up and the region will then actually solve the problem. But if you don't come together and if you don't solve it, even if it's instead of someone else, it's the matter of the entire humankind. It's the matter of entire world. And I think also these initiatives that was set up in New York in Times Square a while ago by this artist that showed the clock with how much time we have left if we continue acting the way we are. It was, I think, 7 years on the clock, which is completely crazy to think that we have come to the point in our history that we literally ourselves with our produce, with our actions, that we have created a world where we have only 7 years to live. So I think that even though we've all been in a situation that it has been said to us that we're doing this instead of someone else, but yes, we are, but someone has to do it. And I think I completely agree here with Alicia's point that this is something that a community has to come together. And I think with the initiatives such as the Fridays for Future, it has come together. And I was really shocked when I first started following this Fridays for Future that it has actually come to my country. And I live in Slovenia, which many of you probably even haven't heard about it or have no idea where it is. Super small country, but the initiatives have come and it was one of the bigger things of that year. So I think that, yeah, we are doing it for someone else, but I think that it is at the moment worth it because, well, I want my children to live somewhere. So yeah.
Thanks a million, Lucia. That was absolutely, yeah, where we were going with this. And it's been absolutely a pleasure to hear from all of you guys and from the amazing work you have done. I think it's quite impressive to hear about all of your achievements and all of that you've been working on. But to me, at least, you were really good also at telling us that it all starts small, right? All of you have started from somewhere. And it also talks about the power of youth organizations because you were able to magnify your passion and your interest and your ideas thanks to the structures that have been created around us. And sometimes youth organizations aren't activated yet on a topic, but they leave the space to their young people to create that powerhouse. So absolutely, thanks a million for reminding us. Thanks a million for giving us some inspiration on what can be done and what can people do and how does it start and how can people really get there. Is there any other question from the participants? I'm gonna ask you once again, and then probably we can let our wonderful panelists go because they've already donated a lot of their time and they've been absolutely brilliant. Any other question? Any wave? and or shout out from the chat. Hi, Monica, yes.
Yeah, I have a small thing now that you're thinking about project ideas. I read this really cool study that actually the most convincing thing for grown-ups, like our parents' generation, it's not politicians saying something or an expert or a scientist or any of the people we should be listening to. Actually, if you can get the kids to convince the parents of something, then you can get the parents to stop eating meat or save some energy or something, because they don't listen to reason at all, but they love their kids. So there's like a sneaky route. And I thought this was a pretty cool superpower. Maybe you can use this for something in your work.
Absolutely, Monica. Thanks a million for that. Caleb.
So there was a point I wanted to make that tied Alicia and Lucia's point, but then as well, Monica said that it ties it together even more. And I think when we look at young people in spaces that are trying to make change and action at a local level, that there's two different things. So firstly, young people are looked at as quite radical, change making, constantly on the move people that are calling for the most extreme things. And like when we look at the climate strikes, young people are painted as radical activists. When we look at the COVID-19 crisis, all the incredible work that has been done by youth organizations and young people in communities is forgotten about because maybe 5% are out partying. And when we look at it in that frame of mind, it also turns to the side of things where we think about how we can find strength in numbers and how we can bring about the local change. And something interesting that I've been trying to look into more is, I suppose, the psychological and the philosophical side of what change is and how you can bring change through collective action. And when we look at it like that, we go through our lives, like everyone, like every single, I know I can admit it, I know everyone else probably can admit it too, that we can find from time to time that we're just mindlessly doing things. Like one prime example is if you're driving in the car or someone's driving you in the car, I can guarantee you can't tell what the stop sign is on your left or how long you were driving along past that green hedge or how many hills you passed, because our mind these days is framed to be autonomous and that we're always going. But if we really want to make the change that we want to see, we need to start being present in the issues that we face. So if there was one small action that I could ask all 26 people here today to do, is go out and convince 1 to 3 people about why we need to tackle climate change. And if you think about it, everything in our lives is a multiplier effect. Like when you look back to simple things like the introduction of the iPhone, it all started with one person designing the iPhone, and then half our world have it now. So if you can go out and convince 3 people, maybe those 3 people might convince a further 3 people, and it goes on and on and on. And I suppose that when we look at it in that side of things, that we need the strength in action and we need the togetherness, and only together we can move forward and truly tackle probably the biggest crisis our generation has faced, which is climate, with a mix of COVID as well.
Thanks a million, Caleb. Absolutely. And this is a great message to end our session on. So if there are no further questions, I would like to thank our panelists. It's been absolutely inspirational, and it's a great way, I think, to kickstart our Youth-led Solution Summit next week. So if you can, please tune in and register if you can for the summit itself, and to be inspired still, and maybe find other alleyways and new partnership to join, to multiply, and to really reach this multiplier effect of all of your great work that has been done at all the levels that you've been working on. So thanks a million for joining YMCA Europe on this, and by proxy also the World Alliance of YMCA and the Y of the USA, who have been promoting this this global action. And I was really, really happy to organize something at a European level, because I think us old Europeans have a lot to to add to the game as well. And thank you again for everything. And we will be sharing the live on YMCA Europe page and our social media. please feel free to tweet and to keep accessing the live. And thank you again immensely for your time today. Your volunteer time is always precious and is always taken away from your lives. So absolutely amazing, amazing example of citizenship in action. So thanks a million, and I'll give you a, I'll wish you a great weekend, and bye and see you soon, I hope. Thanks a million again. Bye.
Thanks a million.